beautifully and kept his cool and calm. He didn't panic. So I actually recommended him for an award. Says you must encourage a youngster. Unfortunately, as usual, command, I don't know what they do. He got nothing, poor chap. But
so a small break here, sir. I think we should salute your leadership qualities.
No. This is just
the way, in spite of the other direction from the seniors, you made it happen that he landed safely and he was safe and the aircraft was also safe, crossing from the enemy territory to our territory and safe landing under your guidance.
Thank you. But really, that was a decision on the spur of the moment. You don't think.
Yes, sir.
You don't calculate all the risks. Because let's say it had gone wrong. Let's say Laluri had got hurt or lost his life doing this. They would have hanged me. You know that.
Of course. No, that was your gut feeling. That was your intuition.
Yeah, so you don't think of the risks at that time when you're young, and you just do what you're supposed to do, and what looks best to you at that time. And luckily, it turned out well. Again,
turned out to be the best. Yes.
Yeah. So that's it now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to move on, basically, because otherwise you'll run out of time and questions. After this, actually, by the 10th, 11th, we were sometimes just sitting at home, on the ground, without any missions because the army was moving rapidly. General Sagat, I must mention very quickly General Sagat.
Yes, sir.
As soon as we achieved air superiority by the 6th and 7th, and he heard about it, General Sagat immediately used those 11 odd helicopters, Mi-4s that were there in that area and a couple of Alouettes with him. He used these immediately to launch a whole Gurkha battalion towards Sylhet and lock up that brigade inside Sylhet with just one battalion. As a matter of fact, 2 brigades were locked up because the number of sorties carried out by this Mi-4, which could carry very little, and the Gurkhas, fighting. The Pakistanis also made a mistake thinking it's a whole brigade that he had landed over there. Close to Sylhet.
Okay.
So they didn't move out. They stayed in Sylhet and surrendered quietly at the end of the war. So can you imagine one little Gurkha battalion, 4x4,
amazing,
with their guts and Sagat's initiative, locked up 2 brigades completely in Sylhet, and they couldn't take part in the war thereafter.
Okay.
By the 9th, General Sagat's mandate actually given to him by his army commander and General Manekshaw, army headquarters, whatever, was only to move his corps up to the Meghna River, east bank of the Meghna River, and capture territories like Comilla, Sylhet, Chittagong, and remain on the east bank of Meghna. Meghna is the huge Brahmaputra river called Meghna in Bangladesh, and it's a huge broad river. Sagat and the Pakistanis, when they withdrew from the east bank at a place called Ashuganj, blew up the bridge also, so that the Indian army couldn't get across easily and didn't have enough stuff. What he did was, he didn't worry. Same helicopters, he lifted almost an entire division across to the West Bank and said, race for Dhaka and head for Dhaka. So he landed this brigade, various brigades in places like Narsingdi, Narayanganj. Now, all this, we used to hear little bits from our GLO, Major Tripathi, who was in Hasimara, that time as youngsters, basically. So we knew that how the war was progressing and Sagat's exploits, little bits, not details. I read about them much later in details. But because there were no missions coming, in the meantime, we'd also dropped a battalion, 2 paras at Tangel on the 11th of December, right? Okay. For which Supi and I had gone for a photo recce on the 9th to see the area around Tangel, took some photographs, and then they selected the site. So 11th, the para brigade, the para battalion dropped. Again, the Pakistanis were given the impression that the whole brigade had been dropped, but only a battalion had been dropped. And they also raced towards Dhaka from the north under 101 Com Zone, which was in Shillong, and 4 Corps was in Tripura area, that side, in the east. So all these prongs were moving towards Dhaka, and Major Tripathi would give us the forward line of own troops in the briefings, which we used to call FLOT. So because the army didn't have much resistance, they had bypassed all the defensive positions or the fortresses. We weren't getting enough demand, so we were sitting on the ground and thinking, as youngsters, that we weren't getting missions, to fly. Yeah,
Yes.
we literally, as young people, you want to be there, right?
Right.
And fly as much as you could and take part in the hostilities at that time.
Yeah, be in the middle of the action.
Yeah, you wanted to be. I mean, otherwise, what's the point of being in a war and you'd miss out on the action? So we were doing that. So Major Tripathi would brief us, and we were wondering, because I even asked, I remember discussing with Major Tripathi, so what's going to happen now? Troops are heading towards Dhaka. They're going to be closed. The war's going to finish in a couple of days. And how are the troops going to take over, Indian troops? How do you intend to, I mean, as an army chap, tell us, how will you take over Dhaka? Will there be street fighting, or will there be this, or will there be that? And Tripathi said, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know. I have no idea. Right? But this is what's happening. So we thought we were missing out. Now, on this eagerness about flying, let me give you a personal incident of the 10th before I go further, very quickly. My younger brother was a paratrooper, Brigadier Apte, I mentioned that day, if you remember. He was in 7 paras. And we lost him on 8th of December in Jashore area in a ground action. He was not paradraft. Supri Kaul got the telegram for my, I think, army headquarters or my father or somebody on 10th, just around the time when I was returning and after return with Laluri's mission. And so he was the CO, and towards the end, adjutant, I was the adjutant. So towards the end, when it became dark and we finished all the flying and debriefs, he told me, come over to my office. So I said, yeah, sure. I took a pen and pad thinking that he had some instructions for me or something like that. And he told me no. They gave me the bad news very gently. And he said, why don't you take the day off tomorrow? Go get drunk tonight and, take the day off. And I told him, I said, sir, in war, I mean, we lose people. Haven't we lost Samantha and Konde over here in our own squadron? Do we stop flying because of that? Losses are part of a war. So I would humbly request that I continue flying. And I flew the 11th. So we let me, actually. So though we had a few extra drinks that night, but we still flew. So young people were that keen to fly all the time, regardless of personal loss or tragedies or whatever. So we were discussing as if the war was, passing us by and we're not going to get anything now. When suddenly on 14th morning, this very important mission came up. On 14th morning, Supi, me, as his number 2, permanent number 2, Bozo and KB Menon, Flight Lieutenant KB Menon. We were led into the base ops again and briefed on a mission. And I believe some intelligence had come that at noon that day, which is at 12 o'clock on 14, Mr. Malik, who was the governor of East Pakistan, and Niazi, who was the army, Lieutenant General Niazi, who was the CNC of the army in East Pakistan, were going to have a meeting in the governor's house at noon with all their advisors, etc. And to avoid the street fighting and things, we wanted to send them a psychological message, a blow, basically, more like a coercive action, to hit the governor's house at that time, at noon.
Okay.
So four MiGs from Guwahati, mainly from 28th Squadron, which I commanded much later on MiG-29s, my own squadron, and 37th Squadron, 4 Hunters, were asked to attack governor's house at noon that day. So we said, fine. Fine. But Supri naturally said, where's the governor's house in Dhaka? I mean, in a town, how do we find a building, basically? It's not something... It's not like Rashtrapati Bhavan, which just stands out on its own. Even if you tell me I have to look for it, because there are many other buildings that can look like, Rashtrapati Bhavan, all these old buildings. So anyway, we didn't know where a governor's house was. And can you imagine, between the base ops officer and Tripathi, they pulled out a Second World War Burma shell tourist map of Dhaka city.
Okay.
In base ops, I don't know how it came that day there and how it landed up, we don't know. But this tourist map, street map, was what we used. So based on this tourist map, I think, remember there were no Xerox machines those days. There were no photostats. So Supi, I think, carried the tourist map, and we guys just kind of memorized the location in relation to various points. One moment. Decline. One second. Okay. I'm sorry, there was a call in between. I just disconnected it. So,
okay, sir.
Yeah. So we went. So Supi and I were in the lead mission from Hasimara, and Bozo and KB Menon were to follow us about 10 minutes behind after we'd finished our attack. So now, because with the air superiority, we went at about 15, 20,000 feet, medium level, and went across with 8 rockets, 8 T-10 rockets, 2 tanks, 8 T-10 rockets, and guns loaded inside. And from 15, 20,000 feet over Dhaka, we descended to around 6,000 feet. Remember, the ICAC over there was effective till about 6,000 feet. So we descended over the ICAC, and we could see all the... ICAC in Dhaka was very thick. Like I told you earlier, we lost a lot of people. And many people, I mean, we lost 2 from hunters from us. We lost a squad leader, Bhutani, in a Sioux on the 4th itself. And even on the 15th, 16th, we lost a Canberra flight flown by Flight Lieutenant Wilson, who was my elder brother's coursemate. And we heard about that. And he happened to just go below 6,000 feet or whatever, and one of the shells got him. So it was that bad. So anyway, we descended to about 6,000 feet. That's how we planned the attack. And orbited one to locate the government house correctly and align ourselves to the correct conference hall that we could figure out below the main dome of the building and, things like that. And then, like eagles, we swooped from about 6,000 feet in a 30, 35-degree dive, very steep dive, normally, which we never practice, and put our all rockets through that little arcade and the columns of this building, and all 8 rockets, inside somewhere to scare the shits out of them. Pulled up and did another attack with a long burst of guns, and we gave it to them. And as I finished this second attack, in my turn, trying to join up with Supi, who was ahead of me 2,000-3,000 yards of being the lead, I saw this Intercon Hotel, which we knew about because all the diplomats and the UN officials used to stay there. But this hotel was right in front of me, towering over me because we were now low. And just for the fun of it, what I did was, instead of turning and catching up with Supi immediately, I went straight for this Intercon Hotel as if I was going to fire at them. Right? This was scary. And have fun, basically. I went straight for it. And last second, I just pulled away from them. And, we could see people on the balconies of the various floors looking out because it was a safe place. People used to film from there. And literally, I could see their faces from that distance, literally. And good fun. Anyway, we joined up and came. So this was the first psychological blow that we gave Niazi and his people. And we followed it up the next day on the 15th of December with another attack on the university area. Now, this 40,000 troops, Pakistani troops that had kind of withdrawn to Dhaka to defend Dhaka, were all holed up in university area. So we got that information intelligence. And again, some MiGs from Guwahati, from 28th Squadron, led by Wing Commander Bishnoi. And Supi and I went from Hasimara, and we hit the university area again, literally conveying a message that you can run, but you can't hide from us. We know where you are, and we will get you. This happened on the 15th. And this was the slogan, literally, you can run, but you can't hide. And there's an old movie on it, I think, you can run and you can hide or wherever. So we picked it up from there. And sure enough, that afternoon, early evening, 16th morning, they agreed to surrender by 3 o'clock on 16th afternoon. And General Arora went and took the surrender over there. So the sad part of this is, basically, I'm almost done. The sad part of all this is that having flown over Dhaka, flown over Bangladesh, attacked government house, from Hasimara, nobody got sent to Bangladesh after the war. Guwahati people went because they had Dakotas and Caribous and all kind of otters and all transport aircraft over there in Jorat and Guwahati. So they kind of got lifted to Bangladesh or Dhaka for a day's visit to see what they had done there and visited. From Hasimara, nobody was sent. We were not sent. So we never saw Dhaka from the ground. We only saw it from the air. So this is how it is.
Okay.
Well, those are my essentially the main
you could have been
that I
sent.
did.
You could have been sent.
Could have been sent, yeah, at that time, but I don't know. Come on. I mean, we were young, remember, flying officers. We didn't ask for these kind of things. Command sent us, we would have gone. We were keen. Many of us were keen. Some of the helicopter pilots who were under Nanda Karyapa 111HU, who had operated with Sagat in that area, they got through to Dhaka, visited it, came back with some stories. Some people brought AK-47s or whatever, those rifles with belts and belts of ammo, and they used to keep firing it on the mess. Kind of crazy stuff those days in Hasimara. So,
okay.
Well, that's it. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to take them on.
Yes.
We'll discuss it with everybody.
So, yeah. I think you fulfilled your desire of or passion for flying as you have experienced an adventurous journey itself in the first war itself at the earliest part of your time.
Well, yeah, in a way, nobody wishes for that. Let me tell you. I mean, all of us,
of course, but
we rather avoid war because that also is, we lose a lot of people, and it's maybe adventurous, but it's not a something that you desire or wish.
Of course.
But if you're there, you have to fight.
Of course, sir.
You can't back up.
Now it was the testing time, and you proved your bravery or valiant or whatever the passion you had for flying. All those things came into picture.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sir. So then one question I should ask in the beginning itself: why did you choose coming into Air Force, sir? What was the passion for it?
Well, I
should ask in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, okay, never mind. I was actually doing engineering before I joined the Air Force because I was doing very well in academics. Used to come first in school, topped the university in engineering college for 2 years in a row. My elder brother had already joined the Air Force and he was in transports and flying N-12 by 71, earlier packets. My younger brother was through NDA and about to become, he was also going in to the army. So my father was not very keen that I get into the Air Force, and he actually tore off some applications initially till 1965 when we fudged one of my friends fudged his signature and we sent it. I was doing NCC Air Wing at the same time because I was very keen on, frankly, at that time when I was doing engineering, though I was very good in books and academics and theory, I didn't know. I mean, those days I used to think of myself 20 years from then when I grew up with thick glasses and nerd, computer nerd or whatever, but a geek, but not anything connected with outdoor and adventure or whatever. I mean, that's the way I saw myself 20 years from then. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be more outdoor, and I was pretty skinny, so, so I want to do outdoor activity. That's why the aero modeling and flying and NCC and trekking and camps through the NCC. I used to enjoy that, firing and whatever. I like that kind of life. So anyway, wanted to join the Air Force like this, and we fudged my father's signature and event. And when this call came for the selection board, my father looked at me and said, "What are you doing? What are you trying to do?" And I told him, I said, "Let me go for the selection board. Maybe they'll fail me in any case. So, let me try at least." I knew that I'll go through, and finally I did go and join the Air Force. I wanted to be a fighter pilot or do something. And luckily, God was kind, and I flew and managed to. I mean, I can show you a helmet here. I always had on day one because I didn't know whether I could fly. I could do everything else on the ground, theory. On my helmets, those days with Chinagraph and later with paint, I always had "God is my co-pilot" written against. There's an old book and a movie called "God is my co-pilot," and I think God was with me
Okay.
in many of these missions. Let me be very honest, because there are many things that I can't explain why they happened. Many, during the war and even later after the war, many things that I did. Sometimes there's no, you don't know how it happened. It just happened. I don't think I was capable of doing it on my own.
Okay.
Obviously, there was someone guiding me. I
Mm.
don't know. I believe in it. So that's how I got into the Air Force, and
So
my passion was flying. And fortunately, God was again kind that I stayed fit till the end. I'm still fit. So I flew till the end. I flew fighters till the end. And even as an, I loved, I mean, I used to fly. I converted onto MiG-29s later, the 28th Squadron, when I converted the squadron onto MiG-29s in 87. So I used to do the aerobatic display on the MiG-29 those days all over. And I continued doing that even as an air marshal. I mean, not displays, but I go and do the same
okay.
aerobatics that I used to do and continue flying. So I used to enjoy that, really. And I was very fortunate, even 3 years after retirement, in 2009, I retired in 2006, January. In 2009, in the Bangalore Air Show in February 2009, the Russians invited me to fly a version of their MiG-29 called the MiG-35, twin-seater, with a Russian test pilot. But he let me do
Okay.
everything because he said, the 29 backwards. Enjoy. And I did everything that I used to do on the 29
Okay.
earlier on that aircraft. Beautiful. I mean, I love flying. I love anything like that. Adventure. Whenever I used to be in the army, I used to drive all their tanks. So I've driven every tank in the army till today, including the T-90
Oh,
in
great.
between, and the Arjun tank,
Okay,
which
sir.
was being developed in Chennai, in Avdi, because I was with DRDO for a while. So when I
Okay, sir.
visited them, they said, "You want to drive it?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to. I'll just have a feel." So I enjoy these kind of things. That's all. So God has been kind and kept me going.
That
You give me an aircraft today, I'll fly
yes, sir.
again,
So
whenever.
okay. So still, we're feeling very young and energetic in the mind.
Yeah, age is just a number. As long as you're fit and God, like I say,
Yes,
I
sir.
thank God for the health that He's given me.
Yes, sir.
When I'm in the US and all my friends,
Okay.
many
So
of my
then,
friends own personal aircraft, I fly them whenever with them. I mean, no, they're not jets and
great, sir. Great.
they're not fully aerobatic, sometimes minor aerobatics. So we do it, whatever we can do.
So I think there is a unique call sign for you, sir. That is, fulcrum.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Fulcrum is your call sign.
Yes,
Can you say something about it?
in the MiG-29, actually the MiG-29 NATO code name was Fulcrum. So when we formed the squadron, I took the same NATO code name as our call sign. So Fulcrum was my call sign, Fulcrum leader. We put, I'll send you a picture. I mean, we took pictures of the aircraft and we called it climbing vertically and said that became the squadron emblem. Fulcrums, the balance rests on us. Fulcrum, you know what Fulcrum means basically. Fulcrum means the pivot on which your balance, sort of moves, weights.
Yes, sir.
So the balance rests on us and those kind of slogans. So yeah, so Fulcrum stayed with me for a long time while I was flying the 29s. Still known as one of the aerobatic displays is available on YouTube. So I can send you a link. You can watch it if you like.
Kindly, sir. Kindly.
Yeah.
So, sir, Ashoka, we heard about your gallantry acts. Now, I think you're also given, by this Vayu Sena medal for your excellency in service, sir. Can you say something on that?
Well, that was when I was commanding 28. I raced 28 squadron from inherited nothing except just the old diaries and everything. They were in Tezpur and MiG-21s. And I still remember J.W. Khan brought the entire squadron mementos and diaries and no funds, really, very little funds, whatever they had, all across, and a few men and some officers who were converting on 29s. I had already converted in Russia. And we went about, just Khan and me, literally, and a couple of other men, no officers because they're all under MCF training. We set up the whole squadron and did, brought it up, and we developed tactics for the MiG-29s. We trained people very quickly, and got everything going apart from my displays on the MiG-29. So that's when they gave me a Vayu-Sena medal for this particular command of the squadron and the raising of the squadron.
So we also all congratulate you for that, sir. Apart from the gallantry award for the Vayu-Sena medal from the President of India also.
Thank you, thank you.
So, sir, we have a lot of guests here. Some of them really distinguished. So I would like to request Vice Chancellor, sir. He was Sergeant in Air Force and became a Vice Chancellor for a law university. He is also on the call. So Sachinarayana Garu is our Sri Sachinarayana Garu from Visakhapatnam. Sir, we'd like to ask anything.
Pleasure having him, and welcome his questions.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Sachinarayana Garu.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, Sachinarayana Garu, please go ahead.
Please put on your video also so we can see you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Sir, put on your video, sir. Hello, can you hear me, sir? Sachinarayana Garu. Hello. Okay, sir. I think we'll give him some time, and there may be some issue with him. And we have also, sir, our distinguished guest, Brigadier Apte Saab. Sir, would like to share something with our Air Marshal, sir. Brigadier Apte, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Air Marshal Masand, sir. That was excellent. Actually, I had heard about your story much earlier, and I must compliment you for the daredevil action that you performed with Air Chief Marshal Kaul. In fact, I was in the first delegation which was invited by the government of Bangladesh in 2010 as a war veteran.
Oh, wow.
And Air Chief Marshal Tuki Kaul was supposed to be the team leader. I met him very briefly in the Army headquarters that day, 2010 December. There was a briefing at the Army Battle Honours Mess, and I had reported 2 days earlier. And it was just a pity that Air Chief Marshal Kaul fell down in the bathroom just 2 days earlier, fractured his leg, and he had to drop out of our team going to Bangladesh. So that was a big blow to all of us, because we were really.
He should have sent his number too, but he didn't.
So otherwise, I'm sure we would have met you there.
Yeah,
But even the Bangladesh people were waiting to listen to his first-person account. And so that was one thing which I do remember. But I must say, being an army officer on ground as a second lieutenant, and having my own cousin killed in action on the 4th of December, Pradeep Apte, on the Western Front, we realized the close integration and the intimate support between the Air Force and the Army. And that has always been an outstanding integration synergy between the ground forces and the air forces. And I am a gunner officer, so I must say with a lot of pride that for the information of all those who are on this particular video conference, that the heralding of the start of war commences with the airstrikes and the guns opening up on all the fronts. And we also herald the closure of war because the guns fall silent and the Air Force also gets grounded and they're no longer in action. So I think that is the major signifying factor. But I must tell you, Rao Sahib and Pathak Sahib, that what Air Marshal Masand has described is something which only a person of his personal, experience can do that. I have witnessed it, and let me tell you, I have been at the receiving end under enemy gunfire. I have also been under the enemy air attacks, because when we captured Flight Lieutenant Parvez Mehdi and Khalil Ahmed, it's not a very comfortable thing to be under enemy air attacks. And as Air Marshal Masand has actually seen the Intercontinental Hotel people out in the balconies, And having seen their faces, let me tell you, I have actually seen the face of Flight Lieutenant Parvez Mehdi diving over my gun position at just above treetop level. So it was providence that he didn't bomb us. The bombs fell in front on the engineer bridge marshalling harbor. So these are all luck. This is fortune. And all I can say is that the 1971 war was an excellent example of integration between the three services, something like what we had seen in World War II during Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy and the way the Air Force struck in. So I have great respect for whatever you all have done, sir. And one thing I think which you haven't mentioned, but the public here must know, that then Flight Lieutenant Masan, later Air Marshal, carried on his duties despite getting to know the fact that his younger brother had been killed in action. That is Lieutenant Masan, who was a paratrooper with the 50 Independent Parachute Brigade. And he was on our flank, in fact, we had captured Jessore that day. And the 50 Para Brigade with his parachute battalion, I think it was 7 paras, they were on our northern flank. And I do remember his younger brother from the NDA days, because he was just, of course, my senior. But I have seen him in the NDA. He was an excellent water polo and swimmer. And he was in the Golf Squadron water polo and swimming team. I was in the NDA cricket team. But we knew them, though not too much. But unfortunately, the entire water polo and the swimming team of that course got knocked out in the war.
Kishore
Bhatpade and Ghanekar, Masan, we remember them. And that is how the old NDA spirit and the camaraderie builds up. So I think, sir, that was a fantastic thing, that despite knowing that your brother was killed in action, I think you put service before self and continue to do what you did. I think that was marvelous, which many non-defense personnel will not really realize. I had a similar situation because I got to know that Pradeep, my cousin, had been captured and killed. So, but we continued. So that's what we are meant to do.
Yeah.
And I think, sir, I must compliment you on a superlative account. I do wish you publish a book of your actions that you have performed.
I'm working on it.
Yes, sir, that will be a wonderful idea. And I think I must thank you, sir. It's been a wonderful description. And I must thank Mr. Pathak and TBR Rao that they have taken on this initiative, which I think is a wonderful initiative. And I do hope he invites some youngsters who get to know what deeds the Army, Navy and the Air Force have done. Because I think the youngsters will only realize the value of the armed forces when they realize that India is facing an existential threat, which so far it is not. But if you go back to the Second World War, how Britain performed was mainly because of the existential threat. So I think Pathak Sahib and TBR Rao Sahib, very well done. And all I will request you is, please put this on the forum for many younger generation people to attend. Let them know what the Indian Armed Forces have done. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brigadier Pate. And I just want to say one thing. I did mention about Bharat very briefly, but about this gunner's tale, incidentally, I was married to a gunner's daughter, so I had heard this before. Okay, it's from my own father-in-law. Thank you.
Great, sir. So, your father-in-law is who, sir? Just for information.
Brigadier Mitra, retired, SN Mitra, Satyendra Nath Mitra. He was an old gunner.
Is his wife's name Mithu?
Absolutely.
So, sir, your father-in-law and my dad are co-mates.
Wow.
What a coincidence.
My father and Brigadier Mitra are batchmates from the artillery.
Wow.
I am incidentally a third generation army officer.
Gunner, okay.
No. My father was a gunner, IC 469, Second World War Commission, and he was General Jacobs' coursemate.
I see.
Yes, and that's how I know about your mother-in-law and my mother were very dear friends. And yes, and my
small world, see?
yes, And my father and your father-in-law have been very dear friends. But my father's maternal uncle, Mama, was Sandhurst Commission and 16 Cavalry fought under Montgomery at Alamein and then later converted to paratroopers. And he incidentally has the distinction of being the first 50 independent parachute brigade commander during the 1947-48 operations.
Wow.
Major General Y.S. Paranspe. He later commanded 26th Infantry Division, and if I am not wrong, was Free India's first Indian Adjutant General. That's my father's maternal uncle. And
we must meet one day and discuss all this personal information. You know my brother, you know my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law. I mean, that's amazing that you knew her name, first name and the pet name. Yeah, she was called Meetu.
Yes, sir. So, where are they now, sir?
They both passed away, unfortunately.
Oh, very sad. Yeah. Very sad. But do convey to Mrs. Masan that, I mean, my parents, her parents.
She also passed away, unfortunately, in 2012.
Oh, very sad.
But the younger sister is still there, and I'm in touch with her. And, anyway, we'll meet one day, Brigadier Apte, and we'll talk about it. Have a drink together, and discuss old times and then old stories. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sandrav.
No, what?
Anyone else?
Yeah. What a coincidence, sir, with your both the brothers and the others, and including you are all the air warrior, and he is the really truly a ground warrior, having seen the war physically. So I think we should our air warriors should give a big round of applause to our Brigadier Apte, sir, for his value addition in all our programs right from the day one, sir. So really, we are grateful to you, sir, and very valuable contribution, adding value or color to our program. In fact, you have been. So yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for our wonderful narration of the things. And I think
big salute to the
I think Group Captain Das, sir. Yeah, yes, sir. Okay, so now we have another war hero, sir. Group Captain Das, sir, DK Das. So he's on the call. So he's also a Veer Chakra holder. The other day I was seeing his recreation of his part on Longowalla part, where he flew the first flight. He's on the call, sir. If you can speak or share something with our Air Marshal, sir. Group Captain Das, sir. Unfortunately, he has not been well, keeping not in good health. So, yeah. So, if that is not possible, then we have another hero, sir. So, whom we had on the last week, that Wing Commander Quatra Sahab is also on the call. Sir, would like to say something with your batchmate and friend. Wing Commander PPS Quatra, sir. You can unmute and talk, sir. Yeah. Otherwise, any other person who has directly associated with our Air Marshal, sir, during the course of the service, prior to them, I think somebody was giving a message that he worked under Masan, sir.
Any questions, actually?
You can unmute and ask, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Otherwise, any other question for anybody, whoever has a question, they can unmute and ask. Or we have our
Air Marshal Masan, sir. I have one question.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sir, you see, when the air support missions were planned on the Eastern Front, I'm sure there was a JOIR functioning, that's the Joint Operations Information Room between Eastern Air Command and Eastern Ground Command, that is under General Jacob. So, was there a clear idea as to what amount of air effort would have been required? Because keeping in view that the Indian Army was launching its offensive on a four-pronged front. One is the Western Front on the 2 Corps side, then one on the eastern by General Sagat on the 4 Corps side. Then you had two prongs. One was the northwestern, and one was the northeastern under 101 communication zone area.
Right.
So basically, we were doing a 4-pronged offensive action, and we also knew that possibly the Chinese could have interfered. Could have. I mean, not definitely. But so my first question is, when the overall air effort was allocated to Eastern Command, was there an ab initio allocation of air forces from a fighter mission perspective and a bomber mission? Like classically, you would have had a fighter command and a bomber command. So I know these were integrated. That's my first question. And the second question to you, sir, is when we possibly had an idea that the US 7th Fleet would have been coming in closer, was there any perspective plan for a long-range bombardment or some kind of a deterrence value for the US 7th Fleet? Though I know we are no match for the US armed forces, at least in 1971. But was there any ab initio plan that was thought of any other threat looming up?
Who's can I get your name? I don't know who asked this question.
He's a group captain Das, sir. Group captain
Oh, okay,
DK Das.
okay, DK Das. All right.
No, sir. Sorry, sir. This question has been asked by me, Brigadier Ajit Apte.
Oh, Ajit. Okay. All right.
Sorry, sir. Sorry.
All right.
Sorry. Okay.
All right.
Yes.
So, Ajit, as you would know, I was a flying officer, so I didn't know what was going on at much higher headquarters. But from what I could gather, if you ask my honest opinion, there's an advanced headquarters which was based in Calcutta along with the... Somebody's talking. Can you mute yourself, please? Whoever.
Yeah, one second.
Whoever's...
Yeah. I request others to keep them under mute. Please go on mute. Yes.
So the advanced headquarters was there with Army Eastern Command in Calcutta, and the planning was made. Now remember, we had initially, to start with, we had 11 fighter squadrons in the east against that one single Sabre squadron of Pakistan in Dhaka. Even catering for Chinese and keeping some aircraft on ORP just in case the Chinese intruded in the north or made some threatening moves or whatever. And the fact that 2 squadrons were moved out very quickly when we realized that we had surplus air effort. We still had 7, in my assessment, about 7 squadrons worth of effort against that single squadron. Now, as you would realize, nothing moves on the ground, on surface, unless you have command of the air. So the Air Force's first objective is to make sure, even if you don't see them, that they win that command or air superiority or air supremacy or dominance, as we call it, in the air very quickly. As I mentioned earlier, we could have done this in the first 2 hours on the 4th of December, to be honest with you. By going in with bombs, and if the lone Sabre squadron didn't come up, we could have bombed the runways and grounded them in the first mission itself. Unfortunately, the planning was such where we went in low-level profiles and raids, and it took us 2 days, actually, then to finally get to this answer. But even on the first day, there was some effort which was marked as pre-planned for the Army as close as support. Maybe not enough, but I don't think, frankly, Ajit, between you and me, I don't think the Army understood how to use air power at that time. How to ask for it. Like I gave you an example. We had this photo recce assets with us in Hunter Squadron. And the entire war, we just did 9 missions before the war to collect information, and one as late as 2nd of December. Now, quite frankly, 4 Corps under Sagat had already started moving in or probing by the 1st of December, as I was told later. So, third, when we sent the films across or the photographs across, how much use they were made of, I'm not certain. Why didn't we earlier plan and ask for all the kind of intelligence we could gather, not through the Hunters itself? There was also a Sioux squadron in Panagarh. which carries an inbuilt camera with it. We could have done some photo recce through that vertical camera. It gives you panoramic view, a stereo view of the entire area. You could analyze